The cabin was quiet in the way only first class ever was, the kind of quiet bought with money and entitlement. Leather seats hummed softly beneath passengers dressed in tailored suits, designer dresses, and watchers worth more than most people's homes. Outside the small oval windows, clouds drifted like indifferent witnesses. Inside, every movement felt rehearsed, polite, controlled, until it wasn't. Malcolm Pierce sat upright in his seat, phone pressed lightly to his ear, eyes fixed forward. He wore a black tuxedo, crisp and understated, not flashy, not begging for attention. The bow tie was neat. His hair was trimmed carefully. Everything about him suggested restraint, control, wealth that didn't need to announce itself. "Dad, I've boarded," Malcolm said quietly. "Yes, everything's fine." Across the aisle, a flight attendant paused mid-step. Her name tag read Claire. She was blonde, sharp-featured, and already irritated, though nothing had happened yet. Her eyes locked onto Malcolm's phone like it offended her personally. "You need to end that call," she said, her tone clipped. Malcolm turned his head slightly. "I will. I'm just letting my father know I'm seated." Claire's lips pressed together. "Regulations say all calls must end immediately once you're seated." Malcolm nodded. "Understood." "One moment." He turned back toward the window, voice lowering. "I'll call you when we land." That should have been the end of it. Claire stepped closer. "Too close," I said now. Malcolm pulled the phone from his ear and looked up at her, confusion flickering across his face. "I am ending it." Her voice rose. "You people always think rules don't apply to you." The words hung in the air, sharp and unmistakable. A few passengers glanced over, interest sparking behind polite indifference. Malcolm felt it then, the shift, the judgment, the assumption. "I'm sorry," he asked calmly. Claire crossed her arms. "You heard me?" Malcolm straightened. "I don't appreciate that tone." I complied. She scoffed. "Of course you think you did." Malcolm placed his phone face down on the tray table. "There. Is that sufficient?" For a split second, it seemed like she might step back. Instead, she leaned forward, her voice dropping into something venomous. "Don't get smart with me." That's when it happened. Her hand moved faster than anyone expected. A sharp crack echoed through the cabin as her palm struck Malcolm's face. The sound cut through first class like a gunshot. Silence. Malcolm's head snapped to the side. His cheek burned. His ears rang. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't react the way people expected him to. Across the aisle, a man whispered, "Did she just?" Another passenger gasped. Claire's eyes widened, as if she herself couldn't believe what she'd done. Then her face hardened. "He was being aggressive," she said loudly. I felt threatened. Malcolm slowly turned back to face her. His expression wasn't angry. It was stunned, hurt, controlled in a way that terrified her more than shouting ever could. "Aggressive," he repeated quietly. She straightened her uniform. "You raised your voice." "I never raised my voice," Malcolm said. A man in a gray suit stood up. "I was watching. He didn't do anything." Claire snapped her head toward him. "Sir, sit down." Malcolm lifted a hand. "It's okay." He reached into his jacket, slowly, deliberately. Claire tensed, hand hovering near her radio. Malcolm pulled out his wallet. From it, he removed a black card and set it on the tray table. "I'm Malcolm Pierce," he said evenly. "My father is Jonathan Pierce." The name rippled through the cabin like electricity. Jonathan Pierce, billionaire investor, media mogul, owner of half the network. This very airline advertised on. Claire's face drained of color. That doesn't matter," she stammered. Malcolm looked at her, eyes steady. "It matters because you assaulted me. And because this plane has cameras." Her gaze flicked upward. "Every aisle," Malcolm continued. "Every angle." The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "This is Captain Reynolds. We've been alerted to a disturbance in first class." Claire swallowed hard. "Please remain seated," the captain said. "Security will be boarding." Claire's composure shattered. "You can't do this," she hissed. "You people think money makes you untouchable." Malcolm finally stood, slowly, calmly, every movement deliberate. "No," he said. "I think accountability should apply to everyone." Two security officers entered the cabin minutes later. The murmurs grew louder, phones discreetly lifted, videos recorded. "Ma'am," one officer said to Claire, "we need you to come with us." Her voice broke. "He provoked me." The man in the gray suit spoke again. "No, he didn't. Another passenger nodded. I saw everything. One by one, voices joined in. Claire looked around, realizing too late that the narrative she relied on wasn't working this time. As she was escorted away, Malcolm sat back down, hands folded neatly in his lap. His phone buzzed. A message from his father. What happened? Malcolm typed back slowly. Someone thought I didn't belong. The plane eventually took off, but the story didn't end there. By the time they landed, the video had already gone viral. Headlines followed. Flight attendant slaps. Passenger identity revealed. Minutes later, witnesses dispute claim of aggression. Airline launches internal investigation. Claire was suspended within hours. Fired within days. She released a statement. Apologies, explanations, claims of stress. None of it mattered. Malcolm never gave an interview. He didn't need to. The footage spoke for itself. Weeks later, Malcolm sat in his father's office, city lights glowing below. You okay? Jonathan Pierce asked. Malcolm nodded. I've been okay my whole life. Jonathan sighed. I hate that you still have to prove it. Malcolm smiled faintly. So do I. Outside, planes crossed the night sky, full of strangers, full of assumptions, and somewhere between the clouds and the ground, a line had been crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Not because of who Malcolm Pierce was, but because of who someone decided he wasn't. The next morning, Malcolm woke to silence that felt heavier than noise. The hotel suite overlooked the city, glass and steel reflecting early sunlight, but his mind was still trapped 30,000 feet in the air. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror, fingers brushing the faint shadow still visible on his cheek. It wasn't painful anymore. It was symbolic. He remembered how still he'd stayed, how controlled, how careful. Not because he was afraid, but because he knew how quickly the wrong reaction could have rewritten the entire story. Downstairs, the lobby buzzed with muted luxury. People smiled at him, nodded respectfully, some whispering as he passed. Recognition had arrived faster than he expected. Fame by association, viral by injustice. A woman approached him near the elevators, middle-aged, nervous, determined. I just wanted to say, she began, I was on that flight. I saw everything. Malcolm paused. Thank you. My son is black, she continued, voice trembling slightly. Watching you stay calm. It mattered. Malcolm nodded, swallowing the tightness in his chest. I'm glad it helped. She smiled sadly. It shouldn't have to. Neither of them said anything else. They didn't need to. Later that day, the airline released another statement. This one, longer, more careful. Legal language wrapped in corporate sympathy. Promises of retraining. Commitments to diversity. An assurance that this incident does not reflect our values. Malcolm read it twice, then closed the tab. At noon, his father called. They want to settle quietly, Jonathan said without preamble. Malcolm leaned back in his chair. Of course they do. They're offering a public apology and compensation, and accountability. Malcolm asked. A pause there, resistant. Malcolm stared out the window. Then so am I, Jonathan exhaled. I thought you might say that. That afternoon, Claire sat alone in her apartment, television muted, phone face down on the table. Her inbox was a graveyard. Termination notice. Legal warnings. Messages she didn't open. She replayed the moment again and again in her head, the look on his face, not fear, not rage, shock. She told herself she'd been stressed, overworked, that passengers disrespected her constantly, that she'd felt small, powerless, invisible, but none of that explained why she'd raised her hand. She opened her laptop and searched his name, Malcolm Pierce. Articles painted him as composed, dignified, almost unreal in his restraint. She slammed the laptop shut. Across the country, talk shows debated the incident like sport. Some defended Malcolm. Others questioned him. Why didn't he just hang up faster? Why mention his father? Would this be news if he weren't rich? Malcolm watched none of it. Instead, he sat with a small group of young men at a community center his family funded, quietly, long before headlines. They listened as he spoke, not as a billionaire's son, but as someone who understood the tightrope they walked daily. You don't owe anyone perfection, he told them, but the world will demand it anyway. One of the boys raised his hand. Were you scared? Malcolm considered the question. I was aware. The boy nodded, understanding more than words could explain. Weeks passed. The noise softened, but the impact deepened. The airline's investigation expanded under public pressure. Additional complaints surfaced. Patterns emerged. Claire's name appeared in more stories, past incidents, warnings ignored. When the final report was released, it wasn't just about one slap. It was about culture. Mandatory reforms followed. Leadership changes. Policies rewritten. Malcolm read the report alone one night, sitting in the same suit he'd worn on the plane, now hanging loosely from his shoulders. He hadn't realized how much the experience had weighed on him until it began to lift. His father joined him quietly. "You did good." Malcolm shook his head. "I didn't necessarily." Jonathan placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's how change usually starts." Months later, Malcolm boarded another flight, different airline, different crew, same quiet confidence. As he took his seat, a flight attendant smiled warmly. "Welcome aboard, sir." Malcolm returned the smile. "Think." The cabin door closed. The engines hummed. The plane lifted. This time, no one questioned whether he belonged. But Malcolm knew the truth. Belonging was never the issue. Belief was, and somewhere in the sky, between who people are and who the world allows them to be, that lesson still echoed, waiting for the next person brave enough to stay calm, stand firm, and let the truth land harder than any hand ever could. The story didn't fade the way viral moments usually did. It lingered, quietly, in boardrooms and break rooms, in training sessions and late-night conversations people didn't realize they needed to have. Malcolm noticed it in small ways first. At a charity gala in Chicago, a woman approached him holding a glass of champagne she never drank. "My husband works for an airline," she said. "After what happened to you, their entire staff went through new training. He came home different, more aware." Malcolm smiled politely, but inside, something shifted. Change was never loud. It was cumulative. Another time, while waiting in line at a cafe, a young black man leaned over and whispered, "Thank you for not losing your temper." Malcolm turned. "Why?" The man shrugged. "Because they would have used it against you." That night, Malcolm couldn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed, replaying the moment. Again, not the slap, but the second afterward, the second where he had chosen stillness over instinct. Not because it was fair, but because it was necessary. Across town, Claire packed the last box from her apartment. Her life had shrunk dramatically. Fewer calls, fewer invitations, fewer places where she felt welcome. She stopped telling people what she used to do. One afternoon, she stood outside a grocery store and watched a black father buckle his son into a car seat. The boy laughed, unafraid, untouched. For the first time, Claire didn't look away. She didn't know what accountability looked like anymore. She only knew that excuses no longer fit. Months later, Malcolm was invited to speak at a private aviation conference. Not as a victim, as a voice. He stood at the podium, looking out at rows of uniforms and polished smiles. "This isn't about one person," he said calmly. "It's about who gets believed when no one's watching." The room was silent. "When rules are enforced selectively," he continued, "they stop being rules. They become weapons." Some shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded. Afterward, a flight attendant approached him, yawned nervous. "I just wanted to say, I'll do better." Malcolm met her eyes. That's all anyone can ask. On his next flight, seated beside the window again, Malcolm watched the clouds roll endlessly beneath him. He thought about the boy at the cafe, the woman at the gala, the father in the parking lot, the thousands of people who would never know his name but would feel the ripple. The plane hit mild turbulence. The seatbelt sign chimed softly. Malcolm fastened his belt and smiled to himself. Power didn't always look like control. Sometimes it looked like composure. Sometimes it looked like choosing dignity in a moment designed to strip it away. As the aircraft stabilized and continued forward, Malcolm rested his head back, eyes closing briefly. The sky had always been shared. The only thing changing now was who people believed deserved to occupy it.